Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Ink and Paint. My name is Jill Diffendahl. I'm here with my co-host Ashley Jasmer, and we're joined tonight by Emma Cooley
Hey friends, how's it going?
and Disney Desi.
Hi, everyone.
Thank you for bearing with us there for a minute. In the realm of WDWNT technical problems, that was far from the worst, but I couldn't get the opening sequence to play.
Oh no!
It just you probably heard me clicking like 8,000 times and it wasn't going, so I had to reload it really quick. Anyway, welcome everybody. We're happy to have you guys join us here tonight on another episode of Ink and Paint. Tonight we are talking about Black Widow and women in the Marvel Cinematic Universe. So I know there's going to be spoilers here tonight, but what I want to tell you is we're going to start off talking about women in Marvel in general, that we are going to kind of keep spoiler free for Black Widow. So if you haven't seen other Marvel movies, we are going to spoil some stuff about other Marvel movies and female characters in other Marvel movies, but we're going to save the spoilers about Black Widow until after the commercial break, so that if you haven't seen the movie yet and you don't want it to be spoiled, you can turn off the video for now and then come back and watch the rest of the episode after you've seen Black Widow. But so let's start off talking a little bit about. Let's just kind of go around the room and talk about your favorite Marvel character. And Desi, I want to start with you because I think I know what your answer is, but I want to see if I'm right.
Were you going to guess Scarlet Witch?
I was, yes.
That would have been my answer, although right now it might be Sylvie. But I know not everyone has seen the latest episode of Loki, so I will save my comments on that. But yes, I loved Scarlet Witch, and in general, actually, I feel like I am really enjoying these Marvel TV shows even more than the movies. And honestly, just spoiler free, I feel like they did a better job with the women in Loki and in WandaVision than they did with Black Widow. Just my 2 cents, my personal opinion on that.
Oh, very interesting. That's an interesting thing to say, that you think they did a better job, because I feel like for me personally, I think there were some kind of tropey things going on with some of the women in, for example, I don't know, like for as much as I thought Agatha was a really cool character, I don't know that I feel like she wasn't kind of like the stereotypical villain. But maybe that's not a bad thing. Maybe it like Marvel has been better at that, at making, females the villain. I mean, in general, I guess Disney is kind of good at that, look at Little Mermaid or look at Sleeping Beauty. Like there are plenty of female, like more villains in Disney movies. At least the classic Disney movies are female instead of male. So maybe they're good at that. But
it's true.
Interesting. Yes, Agatha all along.
It felt a little forced for me with Black Widow. That was my biggest gripe, is that it felt forced. Versus, say, in The Mandalorian, that end scene, I didn't even realize it was all women until after the fact. Versus in Endgame, it was like, this is a little awkward and forced.
Yeah, there was definitely some stuff going on. We'll talk more about the villains in Black Widow and how all that went down. We'll talk about that a little bit more later. But I agree. I don't know. There was definitely some. This feels. I understand what you mean when you say it feels forced. All right, I'm gonna cut to you, Ashley. Tell us about your favorite female Marvel character.
I don't know. I feel like it fluctuates. I think for the most part, I think all of the women in Marvel have had some really great moments, and I think they've had kind of like we just talked about, some tropey moments. So it's kind of hard for me to pick one that's like my standout favorite. If I had to pick one, I honestly think it would probably be Agent Carter. Just because I do think she's probably one of the more better well done. She doesn't seem to have as many tropey moments, and her tropey moments kind of go a little bit against type. I also really enjoy MJ, their take on MJ in this universe. I like that she's not just there.
Okay.
She's there. She's Peter's friend. And she's just the damsel in distress, even though she's had her damsel in distress moments. It's not obvious. It's not just her. And she definitely gets a lot of great scenes and scene-sealing moments. So I think those, at least at the current moment, are my two favorites.
I like it. Emma, how about you?
So I'm kind of with Ashley. It kind of goes back and forth. Like, honestly, you could ask me the same question tomorrow and I might say something completely different. As far as my favorite female character, it's probably right now between Monica Rambeau and I would also say Sylvie. I haven't watched today's episode, but I'm not going to spoil it either for any other things that have gone on in that series. If you haven't watched it, you need to. It's so good. But that being said, I also like Agent Carter as well, and it's hard to pick just one character, but I think that's the problem, right? Is that like all of these characters are so great, but they really do have their tropey moments. I mean, even in WandaVision they did, which some of it I did kind of forgive because they were obviously each episode was based on a different sitcom or an era of sitcoms, so of course they're gonna kind of give homage to those tropes and things that would always happen in those shows, but yeah, it's weird. We're making progress as far as having better representation, I feel like across not just Marvel but Pixar and other Disney films. And Star Wars as well, but we still have some work to do. Anyway.
Yeah, there's definitely that. So, weirdly, maybe, I don't know, probably not actually, my favorite female character in all of Marvel is Darcy. And maybe just because I feel like she's so human, but also kind of brilliant. And I love the fact that like she's kind of obnoxious and out there and goofy, but also incredibly smart and like plays a huge role in the plot for the Thor films as well as for WandaVision. Like I was so thrilled that she showed up in WandaVision because I'm like, I can't get enough of this character.
Yes.
But that actually, and I saved it for last. I saved it for mine for last because I wanted to use it as a segue into something that we kind of were talking about before the show started, which is there's an article out there on Digital Spy about the entire MCU ranked by how much time female characters spend on screen. And we were looking at this, and one of the things that I thought was crazy is that in Thor, Darcy only spends like 8.5 minutes on screen.
What?
And potentially even maybe more crazy than that is the fact that Jane Foster, Natalie Portman's character, only appears for 21 minutes out of an almost 2-hour runtime movie. That you've got like these female characters who are so incredibly integral to the plot, and obviously Jane more so than Darcy, but still, Darcy's on screen for 8.5 minutes. And on the one hand, I think that's like, it blows my mind that she's in there so little. But on the other hand, I think, I don't know, I feel like this is a testament to like just females in general, that even though they're kind of relatively marginalized in terms of screen time, they're still so critical to what happens in the plot that like, they can do a whole lot with not a lot of time or resource.
Yeah, because if you were to ask me, I would have thought that it was way more time than that.
Especially for Jane Foster.
Right?
Yeah,
like
I
I
mean,
get that they're secondary characters, but still, it
I would've-
feels
Yeah.
like more.
Right, there are some of the more interesting ones. And I mean, I guess that's a testament to the actors as well for, doing such great work and, with what
Mhm.
little time on screen that they have. But, we should feature these characters more. There's more to their stories and more to tell, which is, we'll get to this later, why one of the reasons why I was so excited about Black Widow. But that's the thing. There's more in the universe to explore with these characters, and I really hope that in the coming phases that we see that, which I think we will. I mean, we have Multiverse of Madness coming. There's the whole Eternals and Celestials thing that's coming along. But yeah, there's again characters that have already existed. Like their stories, I think haven't been explored enough.
Yeah, it's
Well, we do have
certainly, and I
Natalie
think,
leading the new Thor movie too. We do have that coming also.
Mm-hmm.
yeah, I mean, in the
Okay.
comics, like her character plays an incredibly huge part in the Thor storyline. So it's not,
Mhm.
it almost feels like Marvel had to like warm us up, and maybe in general the concept here was to warm us up to the entire idea of the MCU. But I find it very interesting. It almost and it kind of seems this way from the stats in this article about how much women are in these films, that some of the films that showcase women the most are some of the later ones, like Thor 3, Guardians 2, Infinity War, Black Panther.
Captain Marvel.
Those are the films. Yeah, I mean, obviously, but a lot of those come kind of later in, like, towards end of phase 2 and phase 3 of the MCU, that they almost had to warm us up to being okay with seeing more female characters. And just to kind of put a little cap on this, I think this is probably the most interesting statistic in this entire article, which is that the Marvel movie, other than obviously Captain Marvel and Black Widow, that has the most female screen time is Ant-Man and the Wasp, which obviously that makes sense. The Wasp is in the title of the film, and it's a film about Ant-Man and the Wasp, and she's still only in it for 35 minutes.
Like, really?
Nope. She's in it for 35
minutes. I was going to make a devil's advocate point that, especially like with the earlier movies, like with the first Iron Man movie, and you kind of mentioned it when you first started, warming us up to the idea of the MCU in general. Like, I get they want to make it very character driven on the main character because, again, a lot of these original first phase movies are characters that people didn't really know all that well. They weren't X-Men, they weren't Fantastic Four. These were characters that in the MCU pantheon weren't known as well. So they were trying very hard to like introduce the characters, and they were very centric on the character themselves. And then you gave that statistic, and it's like, well, that kind of blows my whole hypothesis kind of out of the water, because that's like is it phase 3, Ant-Man and the Wasp?
I think so.
I think so. Yeah. So by that point, there's really not a whole lot of excuses to why she's so.
Yeah,
so never mind. I tried to take the devil's advocate route, and it didn't work. I tried.
Yeah, and so Emily in chat is saying there's people still out there who have the outdated "girls are no superheroes" attitude. It's a rarity now, thank goodness, which it's definitely more rare, but I absolutely think there is still a lot of societal pressure around women not being kind of as out there, as strong. Like, there's still, like, there's a lot of people that find strong females threatening. I mean, I still experience it all the time, and it's, there's definitely that challenge between, and then there's the how do you be a strong female? Is it trying to emulate what the strong male character is? Is it trying to be your own person? And that's something I actually want to talk about when we talk about Black Widow, because to me, the movie felt different in good ways, that I thought wasn't just trying to make it seem like she was strong the way Tony Stark is strong, or the way that Hawkeye is strong. So I appreciated that there was definitely, they kind of made it her and not just trying to fit her in the same mold as other male characters in the MCU that, don't have superpowers.
I feel like in Star Wars, though, you haven't had the same kind of, I guess, hesitancy towards strong female characters, because even right from the beginning, Leia was, a strong character. When they showed up to rescue her, she was like, "Aren't you a little short to be a stormtrooper?" She wasn't like, "Oh, my heroes."
Right, like she had all the sass and attitude the second they captured her. Even standing up to Vader.
Yes, but so somebody in chat pointed out that Leia is basically the only female who spoke in all the first Star Wars movies.
This is true. This is actually very true.
They still do things like put her in that gold bikini, like in the Jabba scene. Like it is, but it's famously, not. And she didn't
no
really
underwear in space.
Yeah,
no,
she didn't really fight that much.
I will say this though, but again, bang for your buck when she does. Like, she's the one that takes charge and is like, well, screw this, we're never going to get out of here. And like figures out a way when the guys were just going to stand there and try to shoot it out. So I don't like, at least she did good things. Like, they utilized the character well to make her, I think, like a strong female character. It was just unfortunate that she was the only one.
Right.
Like, don't get me wrong.
That was the 70s. But
it's
true. I guess we should be grateful for the one.
Right.
Exactly.
But here's the thing. Here's the problem. We're in the 21st century, right? Like, we should not be talking about this with the MCU. We should not. And here we are. Sure. I'm on a rant. It's fine. We're talking about this. Like that's the thing that gets me. And like, this is also an issue that I see in different stage shows as well. Like, I think, there's a lot, and I mean, again, we're Mean Girls, like in other shows that do feature women and have like strong, like, female leads that actually drive the show. Those are coming, but I feel like still a lot of things in the theater canon are male star vehicles rather than like female star vehicles. And like, same thing with movies. Like, we have more male leads than female leads in general. So like, why they couldn't have addressed this from the beginning, I don't know. But that's just me. It's fine. I'm rant done for now.
Well, and so, I mean, obviously part of the issue here is the perception whether a strong female lead in a film like this is like to the movie companies, to Marvel, and as Disney as the parent, this is about money. This is about whether or not this kind of movie can generate the same kind of box office draw that a film like Iron Man can. And so, I mean, to that end, Black Widow did fantastic at the box office. It's grossed $95 million already, which in our post-pandemic world where a lot of people still can't or are not comfortable going to the movie theater. Yeah, exactly. So, and I don't believe that entirely takes into consideration the fact that Black Widow is also available on Disney Premier Access on Disney Plus, and so there's additional revenue there as well.
Right. And I mean, I guess that goes to show that like these movies are truly meant to be seen in the theater, and I was glad to see it do the numbers that it did so well, because hopefully that it means that Disney will continue to actually put the effort into theatrical releases and not just making stuff for streaming, even though we heard, can't remember which earnings call it was, that there was that big shift to direct to consumer over, spending money for on putting films in straight to the theater rather than direct to release. But so keep going and seeing the movies, people. Keep supporting Hollywood in that way. That way we can keep having these wonderful things around. But that's, again, we still have like kind of a long way to go before we still have a long way to go with recovery to actually see like what those numbers would actually look like in a post-pandemic world, because again, internationally it's a different situation. But
yeah, that's definitely an issue here, is we can't necessarily compare it to, it is not comparable to what the numbers look like. But at the same time, you're absolutely right, Emma. This is a way that people can easily use their pocketbooks to have a voice in the bigger picture of whether female stars in movies, female leads in movies like this is something they want or something they don't. And, if you're like me, there are plenty of times where you're kind of like, ooh, I kind of want to see that movie, but I don't know if I feel like going to the theater, blah, blah, blah. Or I don't know if I feel like doing it on Disney Plus. Like, if that's any kind of incentive for you to push you over that line of, yes, I'm going to go see it, or yes, I'm going to get it on Disney Plus, do it. Because I think this is a way that you can absolutely use not a ton of money to have a voice in how this plays out in the future.
And then go to Diz Twitter and tweet about it.
So, granted, it's not an MCU movie, but just for perspective, because this was obviously pre-COVID, Wonder Woman, which was a great female super movie, the first one in 2020. Its opening weekend, it debuted with $103.1 million view. And they considered that breaking the glass ceiling, and it actually stomped Iron Man.
Wow. So 94
the fact
million
that Black Widow, post-COVID is actually pretty phenomenal.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And I mean, so Emily in chat is mentioning that Wonder Woman 84 was a dud. And I mean, it came out at probably like a really terrible time in the COVID
that good
universe. But also it was a terrible movie. Yeah.
It was.
And I mean, there's
so
that,
disappointing after how great the first one was. Because again, not MCU related, but shameless plug for a female superhero movie done right. The first Wonder Woman movie, fantastic.
Yes, just 100%.
Well, the point I was trying to make with the Star Wars versus Marvel and the way that they do, they portray women, is that it feels more natural. Like, we've had Jyn, we've had Rey, and it's been storyline driven, introducing them. Versus with Marvel, sometimes it feels like, look, we've got a woman character. Look, it's a female. Look at this. And they're doing it because they're trying to get money out of people, saying like, look, we're being inclusive. And so that it feels more like it's shoved in our faces, as opposed to the way that Star Wars has been. Like, they've had Bo-Katan, they've had Ahsoka well before The Mandalorian came out. So I would
tend to agree with that, especially in the beginning. I mean, Black Widow was introduced, like she was shoehorned into Iron Man 2 as the spy character. And it was good. It was an interesting way to introduce her. I'll give him that. But to your point, it clearly was, hey, look, we have girl superhero. She's, SHIELD assistant and all of that. And again, they introduce her. What's her cover? Essentially she's a glorified secretary. That's her cover. She becomes Pepper's assistant. And that was the best cover that they could think of for her.
And she shows up just looking super sexy versus,
of course,
Jyn and Rey. And even Leia, at least in the first movie, didn't show up looking super, scandalous. I mean, maybe
Yeah.
she did when she was in the gold bikini, but that was later on.
Well, no,
Yeah.
that's the one
That was
thing.
the second movie.
Oh, go ahead, Jill. You were going to say something.
I was just going to say, so that's what you said, Desi, about like shoving it in our faces. Like, I think that's always an argument that I hear anytime there's, and maybe less so with something like Black Widow, because in a way it was kind of like she's been a character in the MCU for years now. And so it was, for that, it's almost like it's well overdue that she has her own film. But at the same time, like she was kind of shoehorned in. But like I remember when Star Wars Episode 7 came out and people were like, why did they have to make the star a female? Like they're shoving it in our faces because they want to be inclusive. Like even though it felt organic to the story, there are always people out there who want to complain that they made the lead a female just to make it a female. I mean, I remember, and this is going back, gosh, almost 20 years, when the remake of Battlestar Galactica came out, which like people loved. Like, I mean, people still watch that show like to this day, even though it's been over for ages. But like the fury that people had about the fact that they made Starbuck a woman was like, I mean, I was just like, shut up already. Like, why does it always have to be a dude? Like, it's a remake. Like, have a little creative thinking. So, like, the whole idea that I think there's always going to be people that say, oh, they made it a female just to make it a female, just to be inclusive or whatever. And it's kind of like, no, they made it a female because females are 50% of the population and there should be some representation.
Right. Well, with Star Wars, and it felt like there was equal representation of men and women versus Marvel. It feels like when they're doing a woman movie, they're like, look, it's a woman movie. Look at all these women.
Yeah,
I mean, even look at
I feel like
Captain Marvel was like that too, where it was like I felt like they crammed a lot of women into Captain Marvel, and the scales were offset the other direction. Yeah.
Just that one scene in Endgame, just it looked almost a little silly.
Oh my gosh! You mean the girls get it done scene that was even parodied on The Boys? Shout out if anybody watches The Boys, but like they straight up parodied it on The Boys, and I laughed hysterically.
So did I.
Yeah, it was, oh my god, too funny.
Like that much of a trope, but okay.
So kind of going, Jill actually made a really good point about the whole Starbucks thing. So here's the thing, people. We forget. In Shakespearean times, remember, the men played the women. So why can't the women also play the men? Like, there are companies out there, even in DC, this is actually a big thing that's going on right now, is playing with the idea of that you can identify as any gender, but if you feel like you want to play this role that isn't something that you identify, you can. So that's the other thing. Like, they're telling a story here. Like, that's the thing that matters. Like, gender shouldn't have anything to really do with it, and shouldn't, like, again, we shouldn't be talking about this still in the year of 2021, yet here we are. But that, and of course, again, there's always going to be people who complain, but really, like, we need to move on. We need to move on with gender being an issue. We need to have equal representation, and then move on.
Well, I think it's something always of quality. Yeah, I think it should be on the merits of, is it a good movie? Not, is it a girl movie? Is it a boy movie? And I mean, in the chat, they started talking about the Ghostbusters remake. That is an objectively bad movie. That, again, just played on the part. Like, oh, it's an all-women cast. It's going to be great. We're so inclusive. And they completely rested on that and made an awful, awful movie. Mm-hmm. It's like, it shouldn't matter who the lead is. Make a good movie.
Yeah.
Right. Exactly.
You shouldn't, you don't necessarily, like, make a good movie and maybe make an original movie. I mean, I do think some of the problem, for as much as I thought it was ridiculous criticism about casting a female as Starbuck, at the same time, or, you know, the Ghostbusters movie, don't remake something and just, like, gender flip, you know? Like, it's almost like that feels like a lazy way out. It does. It feels like a lazy way out.
It is, and that's the caveat that I will say to what I said. It does need to at least make sense with the story, or you have to adapt the story to have it make sense. Whatever,
To make it make
it shouldn't
sense.
just be done for the sake of doing that. But, yeah, and to go back, I forgot I had a point about the things being forced. I will say I did feel like Black Widow was a little forced as far as when it was released. Now I understand for the end credit scene. Again, not going to spoil it, not going to talk about it, especially if you haven't seen all of the TV series yet that have been released on Disney Plus. But, you know, to just do that in this particular phase, just for that end scene, I was like, I don't know. I feel like they could have done it in phase 2 or phase 3, and I would have, you know, gotten to enjoy her character a little more than if they had done it now. But
I mean, no spoilers, but I feel like we would have gotten a very different movie if they'd have done it in phase 2 or phase 3 versus now. I feel like now they did it just because they kind of felt like they had to, because all of the fans were screaming for it about how it was not fair that she was the only original Avenger that didn't have her own movie. Especially after she did, you know, she was the only one that died and didn't technically come back in Endgame. And so, yeah, so I feel, but at the same token, that kind of goes back to, well, why didn't she have her own movie? And famously, that's because they didn't think that she could sell a movie by herself, which I think was absolute crap, because even though she didn't have the greatest introduction, people loved her from the get-go. As a character. So to say that she couldn't have sold is ridiculous.
They should have released this movie where it would have made sense chronologically.
Absolutely.
Yeah. I mean, because honestly, in the grand scheme of things, like, the only thing that I think would have needed to change was the post-credits scene in terms of putting it earlier in the MCU.
Yep.
I would argue different, but we're kind of tiptoeing around spoilers. So do we want to go ahead and take that break? Because we're getting kind of dangerously close. Like, we're walking that fine line. But clearly we want to talk about it. So
yeah, we're getting there. We're getting there. Okay, so for the audience out there, here's what I'm going to share with you all is that Desi and Emma and I got together at Disney Springs last week and filmed a little bit of stuff in Disney Springs that we want to show you. So this is all pre the movie coming out. There's no spoilers in this, but it's kind of teeing up for our conversation about Black Widow after the commercial. So we're going to play a couple of clips that we did earlier last week, and then we're going to go to commercial break. So then when we come back, we are going to talk about Black Widow, and that's when the spoilers are going to start. So once we come back from commercial, be warned, there will be spoilers. All right, so let's cue this up and show you guys what we talked about. Or try to. Uh-oh. We might be having technical difficulties.
Oh no! It's news tonight all over again.
Or Park Center.
Or that.
I feel like there's issue with the videos that we have loaded in for the show tonight.
Oh,
all right, well then...
Don't forget, tomorrow night, 9 p.m. Tune in.
Maybe we're going to have to, we might have to cut to commercial and then play the clips after commercial so I can try to pull them back into vMix, because that seemed to work for the opening credits. So we'll see if it works for these clips too. So we're going to cut to commercial and then we'll cut to the clips when we come back.
For creative, innovative, and outlandish programming made for Disney fans, including Cosmic Read Live, discussions and Imagineering attractions, Deep in the Plus, reviewing the catalog on Disney Plus, Ink and Paint, celebrating female voices in the Disney fandom, WDW News Tonight, a late-night comedy show with sketches and characters, Boxed In, opening mystery packages and viewer mail, Picky Eaters, trying to eat our way across Disney restaurants, WDWNT the RPG, a tabletop adventure set in Tokyo Disney Sea, and more of your favorites. Subscribe now at unplanneddowntime.com. Remember, It's not an accident. It's unplanned downtime. This program and many more are brought to you by WIGS, the WDWNT Interglobe Society. Support WDWNT to get early and exclusive access to content you can't find anywhere else, including exclusive post shows for WDW News Tonight, Park Center, and Cosmic Read Live each week, exclusive programs Detailed, and our comedy riffing show Ride Rehab Watches, access to our Discord community, and much more, with tiers starting at $2 a month. For more information, visit patreon.com/WDWNT or visit WDWNT.com and click the Patreon link. Join WIGS and unlock even more WDWNT.
Chomp at your neighbors.
Hold for Mr. Corliss. Hey, Tom.
Killed Nick Wilde and I'm wearing him on my head for warmth.
Oh! Oh, no!
Mickey is giant. Oh, it's time for your favorite. Cups.
WDWNT presents Timekeeping, a year-by-year journey through the history of the vacation kingdom of the world. Join us for the premiere Tuesdays at 10 p.m. Eastern, or watch on demand anytime on the WDW News Today YouTube channel.
All right, welcome back, everybody. Thank you. So we're gonna give it another try to play our clips that we took earlier this week. Let's give it a shot.
Welcome to Ink and Paint, everybody. I'm here on July 5th, so we are a few days before the premiere of Black Widow. Obviously, the AMC at Disney Springs is all set up for the premiere of Black Widow, but we wanted to come down before the movie came out and check it out and kind of see what we're going to be getting into when we see it next week.
Well, I'm excited for this movie. It's been delayed and delayed over and over again because of COVID. And it'll be really nice to honestly see a Marvel movie in the theaters again, just because they're made to be seen in the theater. And I must say that's been one of my favorite things that's come back since, kind of coming out of the pandemic. And the other thing, it's really exciting, even though this character is technically gone in the universe now. It'll be really exciting to see and learn more about Black Widow. And the fact that there is a strong woman being featured in the Marvel Cinematic Universe, again, is really exciting.
I am excited to learn more about Black Widow's backstory. It's a little sad already knowing that she is gone. I'm assuming we're going to see a little bit of Budapest and that Hawkeye is going to show up at some point, just given some of the hints that they have given us previously. I think that this is way overdue, not just because of COVID, but because this character is now dead, and why haven't we heard about her backstory before now? But still excited about it.
I'm excited to see this because it's only the second Marvel movie out of how many dozens now of Marvel movies that stars a female, so I think that's long overdue. I appreciate it's so nice to come here to Springs and see huge posters of a strong female character that every person walking by gets to see. I think that's awesome. But yeah, I want to learn about the backstory. I want to see what happened to her. I just hope we don't come out of it feeling like, oh, that was amazing, but we don't get any more of her. But we'll see. But I'm excited.
So that was our sort of what we're looking forward to in the movie. And then before we get into talking about it, I want to show this as well because we also went to the Marvel store at Disney Springs and kind of checked out what the merch looks like. So I don't know how much time we'll wind up having to honestly talk about the merch that's out there for Black Widow in the course of this show, but we'll play this video for you as well because this was kind of fun, all the stuff that we checked out.
So here we are in the Marvel store in Disney Springs, and this is kind of the ladies' side of things. We've got a bunch of Black Widow merchandise, we've got t-shirts, we've got pop vinyls, we've got backpacks and jackets and dresses. There's the Captain America dress, and then we've got the Captain Marvel action figure, costume, cups, barrettes. So they do actually have, it's not a very big store, so I feel like they do actually have a decent amount of stuff for ladies. In this store, there's the cool Marvel logo lounge fly. I really actually like that denim jacket. I would get that for me. They've got WandaVision t-shirts. They've got all kinds of stuff. So when you first walk into the Marvel store, we've got Black Widow profiled here, right inside the door from the S.H.I.E.L.D. database. Get all of her stats. Her real name is Natasha Romanoff. She's an intelligence agent and super spy. She is 5'6.5" and weighs 125 pounds. I'm sure we'll get into that on the show. But it's nice that she is featured right here as soon as you walk inside the store. So out here on the right-hand side of the store in the window, you have all of the Black Widow merchandise, well, at least quite a bit of it. Backpack, the dress, the jacket, the t-shirt. So she is also nicely featured prominently in the front window of the store.
A little plain. I feel like it could use a belt here. Right. So you see this belt design on the backpack. I feel like that would help make the dress pull it together a little better.
Right, it's just weird that they have the mesh and then the cutout up there. So I think if they did mesh all the way across, they did the logo as the belt, and then they did, instead of the stripes, they had the red logo pattern all the way across the bottom around. So it's like a little better themed, but also just a little more flattering as well. Because I feel like if you know, are a little chesty at all as a woman, that might not be the most comfortable thing to wear.
Yeah. What's the over-under on Miss Allison buying the dress?
I don't know.
That's a very good question.
I don't know if Miss Allison is a Marvel person to buy the Marvel dresses.
If Miss Allison isn't going to buy it, it's not a good dress.
There we go. And that's the tea.
That was the perfect ending to that video. I loved it.
Fantastic.
So there was our tour of Disney Springs and all the Black Widow stuff. But yeah, I mean, it was awesome to see how much Black Widow, and I mean, this came also right on the heels of Cruella being kind of the banner film featured at the AMC at Disney Springs. So we had Emma Stone, and it's interesting actually, if you put the two side by side, the two movie posters, like all black and white and red, all kind of like the female in the center of the poster looking sort of intimidating. And but yeah, it's kind of nice that females have really dominated Springs in the last couple of weeks with all of these movie posters. So nice to see that. But with that said, let's jump into the film. I'm gonna start with Ashley. What did you think? How did you feel about it?
So it was good. Overall, I think it was a good movie. Well, decent. I'll say decent. Decent's probably a better word. I did have my issues with it. I think it created for me, a couple of continuity errors. I think it was odd that it was set between Civil War and Infinity War. I think that was kind of a strange choice, only because, one, I was really hoping that we would kind of get more of her origin story, and we really don't. We get the fact that she was, obviously what we already knew. She was young, and then she was in this deep cover thing in Ohio for 2 or 3 years, and then she went back to the Red Room, but we didn't learn anything really more about the Red Room. Like, there was the montage that I think they thought was supposed to suffice. But I wanted to see, I mean, if we were going to do like a true origin story movie, what I would have loved to have seen is a little bit more of the Red Room training, probably when she was a little bit older, like supposed to about to graduate from that. And then and I would have liked to have seen her actual like recruitment into S.H.I.E.L.D. or more of that actually explored, like how Clint found her, what was the mission that made Clint and S.H.I.E.L.D. come after her. Like, that was more of what I wanted and would have expected. And I think if we would have gotten this in phase 2 or phase 3, that's what we would have gotten, which to me would have been a better movie. Overall, I think this would have been a good sequel movie if we'd have gotten an original Black Widow origin story movie. That this would have been much stronger as a sequel. And then it was weird to me also, again, in the timeline of where it's at, because essentially you see her leave the airport scene and everything where she's fighting against all the other Avengers and these superheroes with like legitimate superpowers and things. And she is her own. I mean, she's holding her own. Everything's great. And then she kind of seems to get her butt kicked like a lot in this movie, like more than you've seen her get her. But like, she seems almost, I don't want to say weaker, but a weaker fighter. Like, she's caught off guard more. Like, people are getting in more hits and punches than what you see in like the other Avenger movies when she's fighting aliens and things. Like, these people, the inmates on the bridge should have been no problem for her. And it's not that she doesn't win, but she struggles more than I was expecting, which I thought was like a weird choice for setting up the fight scenes. So, I mean, overall, it was a good movie. Would I watch it again? Probably, but it's not going to be one of my favorite Marvel movies. And that to me is a little disappointing because I really wanted it to be.
All right. Emma, how about you?
Yeah, I kind of agree with you, Ashley. Like, I think it was a good movie. Like, it's a pretty good, like, it's your standard good Marvel movie. I kind of agree. I wish it had been a true origin story. I really wish it had. It did feel like a sequel movie without having the first one.
Right.
Because that's the thing. We see glimpses of the Red Room and what that was like. Speaking of the Red Room, my shirt. I found this at Box Lunch. Anyway. We see glimpses of it in other movies, but we never see the real thing. And I guess we see a bit of when she left the Red Room to then go do that undercover work in Ohio before she went back to the Red Room with her sister.
Which also seems weird continuity-wise, but okay.
Yeah, but again, we don't see like her full origin story, so we don't quite get it and understand it. And so that was like a weird choice to me. Now, what I would like to see is what if they did a Disney Plus series on and they called it The Red Room, and that was like her origin story, and we actually get to see that from when she was a kid through like when
that would be amazing.
Graduates and recruits to S.H.I.E.L.D. That's what I want to see. Disney Plus, make it happen. I hope somebody's watching. Anyway, but that's the thing. Like I just feel like we were missing that. Now again, like I wasn't as bothered by her struggling with the fight more. I think the one that bothered me the most was the fight scene at the end where all of the Black Widow or all the widows were going against her. But other than that, she's awesome. She, the word that I accidentally said in the video that we had to cut out, like she's a really character. Yeah, that's why I'm not a one take person. Anyway, but yeah, I enjoyed it. I think they could have done better, but I hope maybe that we'll see more content in the future that will fill in those gaps for me.
Desi?
I agree with both Ashley and Emma. The film that I wanted was the actual origin story, where, like Ashley said, we see like her graduation training from the Red Room, and then how does Clint find her? How does Shield find her? How does she get into that? How does she join Shield? That was kind of what I was wanting and what I was expecting. You saw what I said before the movie came out, where I was expecting we were going to see Budapest. I was expecting we were going to see Hawkeye, and they hinted at Hawkeye, and she's like, oh, those aren't bullet holes, those are arrow holes. And, oh, Clint and I hid up here for 2 days. Well, that's the movie I want to see. I want to see that movie. I want to see that movie of Natasha and Clint and how she joined S.H.I.E.L.D. And again, with Emma, the fight scene that, like, I thought felt forced, and the, look, we're being inclusive, we're showing women, the part that I had issue with was the scene at the end with all of the Red Room women, the other widows, and then Taskmaster. That was so anticlimactic to me, that reveal. Oh my gosh, she's Taskmaster. It's his daughter. Like, who didn't see that coming?
Right.
Yeah.
Kind of the same with Sharon Carter's reveal at the end of Falcon and the Winter Soldier. Okay, we didn't see that coming either. I would say that Falcon and the Winter Soldier, for me, of the Disney Plus shows, was my least favorite, just because it was so predictable. And I think that might have been my issue with Black Widow as well, is that, yes, of course, I know where she ends up, because this is a prequel. I'm not going to call it an origin story. I'm going to call it a prequel, because it didn't feel like an origin story to me.
It's like
it's not. We started like most of the way through it.
Yeah, I would call it a midquel, is what I would call it. I mean, it wasn't a prequel, it wasn't a sequel. It was just, this is something that happened in between. And well, I'll let Jill go first with her thoughts, but I thought of something else that kind of bugged me.
Yeah, so to that end, like, here's what bugs me about, I really enjoyed this movie. I liked it a lot. I would watch it again. I would place it kind of in the middle as far as how I feel about Marvel movies. Like, it's definitely above something like Iron Man 2 or Thor 2. It's probably kind of above Thor 1, maybe. There's plenty of movies. It's for sure above Age of Ultron. Like, there are plenty of movies in the Marvel universe that feature men that I think were worse than this. Actually, I kind of liked this better than Captain Marvel as well. So I thought this was a good movie. It wasn't a great movie. It definitely wasn't. I wouldn't be by any means say it cracked like the top 5 of all the best MCU movies, but I really enjoyed it. But that being said, I think it missed a huge opportunity in terms of placement. I agree. I would have preferred the origin story. I would have preferred to understand more about how Natasha went from Red Room to Avenger. That's what I wanted to see, is how she got into the Avengers, how that happened. But even so, with the story that was told in terms of its placement, what bothered me is I think we would have appreciated Scarlett Johansson's character so much more in the movies that chronologically took place after, if we had known all of this about her. Courtney said earlier in the chat, like, she's one of the human Marvel heroes. Like, she doesn't have superpowers. She's a human, and make it more about her human side. Honestly, I feel like there was a lot of that. I feel like there was a lot more of that in this film than there are in most other Marvel films. And that's what I really liked about it, and what I felt like made sense to me about it. The scene with her and Yelena right after they rescue Alexei from the prison, and like, he makes an inappropriate joke about, are you on your period? And Yelena just like deadpans, is like, no, sorry, I don't have any ovaries, so I can't. Like that to me was like I loved that scene so much because it was so like human, and I'm pissed about what you did to me. Like I loved that. And I thought there were some really good moments about, you know, the family dynamic there, even though obviously none of them are actually related, between Alexei and Melina and Yelena and Natasha. Like that whole family dynamic, and it's a shame in a way, and we can talk about this a little bit more, but I think that honestly for me, Yelena was kind of the star of this film, like in terms of who I loved. And that's where I think we saw the most humanity. And in the grand scheme of things, she is no different than Natasha in terms of her training and her background and her abilities. But to me, she was so much more human, and I absolutely loved that. Like I said, I don't think it was a perfect film. I think there were missed opportunities, but I think in general, it was good. I enjoyed it. I'd watch it again. I didn't have as much issue with the whole, like, her getting her butt whooped a little too often. The funniest thing is in that scene at the end where all the widows came in, all I kept thinking of was Kill Bill 2 and the scene where, you know, she's like fighting the 88 and like it's like this huge samurai battle. That's what that made me feel like. I don't know, but I also appreciate that it wasn't just all about her as a person, that there was a ton, like I appreciate that there was a lot of action, because otherwise it wouldn't feel like an MCU movie to me, honestly. And I think a lot of people would have a lot of criticism, and I think they did that in part to make it not feel like just a movie about a female character, but they made it feel like it was part of the MCU, because I think if they hadn't, probably there would be a lot of complaints about like, where was all the action? So I don't think they did the best job they could have, but I think they did a good job, and I enjoyed it.
And I would say that that's fair, but I think that's why, I think in some ways, a lot of what you said, again, it was a decent movie. Like, I did enjoy it. I will watch it again. It's probably mid-tier for me as far as MCU movies go. But again, I think even some of the things that you said are what would have made it a stronger sequel. I think, especially, obviously, now, you know, again, this has come out after she's died. They wrote the script after they already know she's dead. To me, in some ways, and again, talking about representation in the MCU, we have been waiting years for this movie. She wasn't even the star of her own movie. Yelena was.
Yeah.
And why?
Yeah.
Because we're setting Yelena up for, you know, this Hawkeye series or what have you, which I think is still a real damn shame. She should have been able to get her own, at least one movie, again, where she was penultimate. I mean, they even say it in the movie. Yelena was the youngest, best assassin, which up until that moment, we were all led to believe that that was Natasha in MCU canon. And now come to find out, no, it's not. So now I have questions. Why did they recruit her and not go back and recruit Yelena? Like, how did they only recruit Natasha and not know that any of the other widows are out there when there was a widow who was better than Natasha? Which, again, leads me to my question. What did Natasha do that got S.H.I.E.L.D.'s attention? Which that will now never be answered.
Which is why we need a Disney Plus series.
Which is why we need a Disney Plus series. Maybe not legit.
For sure.
Maybe not legit, like, straight up, we're just going to watch, like, 16 episodes of Red Room Training, because that would be a little weird. But, like, right after she graduates and Clint hunting her down, like, if that could be, like, the first 2 episodes. Like, do flashbacks in the Hawkeye series. I'll take that at this point of her, you know, him going to recruit Natasha.
If they can make Robert Downey Jr. look like a teenager again, they can absolutely make Scarlett Johansson look like she's in her late teens, early 20s.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so speaking of which, so we're watching the movie. We watched it. I watched it with Eric Morton and Cookie Boss on Friday night. We got it on Disney Premier Access the night it came out. And when the movie starts, when Rachel Weisz's character shows up, Lee was like, "That's Rachel Weisz," and I'm like, "That is not Rachel Weisz. She looks like 30 years younger than Rachel Weisz actually is, and it's because she was CGI."
In The Mummy.
Well, that's what
I know,
they're doing with the...
exactly. That's all I kept thinking. And so we had to IMDb it because I couldn't believe it was her, but it's because she was CGI'd. And like, I have to say, like, their ability to CGI youth back onto people has come a long way. Like, I remember...
It's becoming a little scary, really.
It's becoming scary. But I thought, like, and then when she shows up later, and obviously she's her current age as older character, like, I was, okay, no, that's definitely Rachel Weisz. But that blew my mind. But yeah, so they can absolutely go back and redo an earlier version.
That's why
they're
no
doing that with Dear Evan Hansen as well. They're aging down Ben Platt with CGI. Sorry, go ahead, Izzy.
No, I was just saying they have no excuse to say, oh, well, we can't do a prequel because she's just too old now. Well, you absolutely can. You can. She already looks fantastic. She's, I think, the same age as me. And she looks like she's in her 20s. So don't tell me that she can't play a younger version of herself. And also, Loki has aged 10 years when he really should still be the same age as he was 10 years ago. And nobody's complaining about that.
But yeah, I mean, like, that's, again, it was a good movie. It was an enjoyable movie. Like, I watched it with my husband and my 3 little brothers. Like, there were times that we all laughed and we really did enjoy it. But again, in the back of my mind, I just kept thinking, this isn't necessarily the movie that I wanted. And again, even though like I said before, it's hard to pick a favorite. She has been my favorite at times in other movies. It's just a damn shame that she couldn't even shine in her own movie, because the way the studio did it, they were clearly setting up Yelena, and I would have loved to. And again, Yelena's a fantastic character. I agree with Jill. She was my favorite. She was hilarious to me. And their scenes were great. Like, they had great chemistry as sisters on screen. And the family dynamic was fantastic. But I don't know. It felt, I wish it had been a sequel. Like, that's just the best thing that I can say.
I think if they had released this in chronological order, if this was released after Civil War, I would have loved it. I would have thought this was a great movie.
I think it would have done better if they would have done it then. Even as it is and as it stands, it would have been to me, I would have enjoyed it even more had it been released in chronological order.
Now that being said, I know Yelena did outshine Natasha in many moments in this film, but I am very excited now to see more of her. And like Florence Pugh, I did not know that she could do that. You know, like last time I saw her in was Little Women, and I was like, that's who played Amy? Like, I'm sorry, what? But anyway, yeah, I'm just like really excited to see, you know, her acting chops more, and the twist at the end where she was kind of going back to I guess the dark side, like going doing what's that character's name?
Clearly working for Val.
Yeah, for Val.
I don't know her whole name. I know it's Val. That's all I got.
It's Valentina something. It's a
Contessa.
really name.
It's a long name.
Job with that. But you know, so now I'm interested to see what happens with that post Snap, because I'm guessing that's kind of where they're going with that series.
Clearly,
but yeah, again, like they really should have focused on her more. Again, no matter how much I enjoyed Yelena's character, because I did, but they should have just featured her more. And I think what would have redeemed it more is if she had more saved herself in that last Red Room scene where the widows were attacking her, rather than her sister coming in to help her. Yeah. I think that would have made the more of a difference to me.
See, this movie should have been Black Widow 2. Black Widow 1 should have been the origin story, and then this could have come out now and we wouldn't have cared about the timing
it would have been, it would rank much higher.
A prior movie. Yeah. If we had the first movie that we should have had, which was her origin story, just about her. I mean, you can talk about how she had a family, whatever, but it should have been about her graduating the Red Room, meeting Clint, joining the Avengers. That's what this movie should.
Well, and again, because it was almost like a midquel, not only in the MCU universe, but even in her own story, it still raises questions. And they even kind of address some of the questions in the movie and then gloss over them at the same time. Like, again, Yelena's like, well, you never looked for me. And it's like, well, that's a really good point. Why didn't Natasha ever look for her?
Well, none of us knew Yelena existed before.
Right. None of us knew she existed. And I get, like, some of that you kind of have to accept in the MC universe as a whole, because, again, like, well, where's Iron Man when Thor's fighting so-and-so, or vice versa? Like, some of it you just have to take with a grain of salt. But there was so much emphasis on family and everything, it does raise the question, well, yeah, why wouldn't she have gone to go and look for her? And then even at the end, and this is what I was going to bring up earlier, it's like, so wait, so the movie ends, she defeats the Taskmaster, they take the Taskmaster and all the other widows, and that's fine. But again, this happens between Civil War and Infinity War, and she just hands off the vials, again, after she's so invested in family and shutting down the Red Room. She knows all these other widows are out there, she downloads the information, and then just hands it all over, and nothing, and she's like, screw it, they've got it. I gotta go back to fighting gods and crap later. Like she literally, like, dumps it all on Yelena and is like, here, and then skips out with Steve to go rescue everybody from the raft, and then that kicks off Infinity War. Like, what?
And
again, nothing's ever mentioned. Right, we don't even know if it works. We don't even know if they succeed. Yeah. We don't know nothing about what happens now with any of that.
So the other big thing I feel like they glossed over was how the super soldier serum got to the USSR, and maybe I missed something completely.
How did Alexei become a super soldier? I'm like, where was that?
Right?
I know,
because
like,
I thought the whole thing from Falcon and the Winter Soldier was, we didn't have the formula. And nobody was able to make it until right now.
But it was kind of
no time between Steve and now.
But again, like, even that's a weird continuity error, because supposedly, again, like, Bucky was, the whole Winter Soldier program was part of that. And he does have, like, a version of the serum, which is why, you know, he can go on ice and things like that, like Steve can. Like, it wasn't the same, it wasn't quite right, but Bucky also has some version of the serum in him, and so did all those other ones that they stopped at the end of Civil War. Actually, the one over in Antarctica, like, they were experimenting. So there is some continuity there, but again, to that point, it didn't work.
Right,
but it did because we have Alexei. I'm confused.
Yeah, and it also, I mean, look at Falcon and the Winter Soldier when suddenly, like, all of a sudden, like, oh, now we have this Isaiah character who was a super soldier. Like, it's like they can pull a super soldier out of nowhere when they need him for
when it's convenient.
A plot device. Yeah, exactly.
But you already set up all this canon in Civil War that, again, like, you were experimenting, but you never got it quite right. And that's why all these crazy people are on ice. Because we didn't get it quite right, and now they're crazy. But they weren't, because they were also Winter Soldiers who were defrosted for missions. And now we have... Although I did hear an interesting theory that I would kind of like explain, because the one prisoner did point out, he's like, well, Cap was still frozen when you claim to have fought him in 87. But I wonder if that somehow plays into the weird timelines because Steve went back.
Oh, maybe. I feel like that's almost like too much of a detail. Like, Marvel sometimes
like not an intentional detail, but somehow they're gonna retcon it that way because they messed up and the fans came up with that theory. So now we're gonna retcon it to fix it.
That's more like it, in my opinion. Marvel's not good at like.
And I mean, again, like, the timeline stuff is already getting really weird with Loki. And hello, Multiverse of Madness. Like, it's just going to go all out the window. So just prepare yourselves. Like, it's just going to get
much like the comic books. And then we're going to have a reset in, like, 10 years and none of this is going to matter.
Right.
It'll be fine.
So, here's some people brought this up in chat, and I think we haven't really addressed this too much yet in this conversation, is Taskmaster. Because lo and behold, Taskmaster, who is like arguably secondary villain in this film, obviously Dreykov, I think, is kind of the mastermind bad guy, but in terms of the like boots on the ground, kicking butt, taking names villain, we've got Taskmaster, who turns out to be Dreykov's daughter. And I know there are some sort of strong opinions about that. Desi, go ahead.
I mean, I know some people online, like the fanboys, are upset that that Taskmaster turned out to be a woman. That I don't care about. What I care about is how completely predictable it was. Like, it wasn't a shock, I think, to anybody.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, the fact that, like, how Dreykov as a character already uses every single woman, every single girl that he can find, like, that, you know, that didn't surprise me. Actually, side note for a second, that seemed a little forced to me as well. Like, the whole, like, taking down the patriarchy moment, like, I was like, great, that's kind of cool, but also that's really forced, that line about when he said, like, about how there's too many girls in the world. I know that's not the exact line, but that just was like, that really bugs me.
Unwanted
like,
girls
it
or something
better.
like that. It was weird.
Yeah, it was weird. Anyway, sorry, continue, Desi.
Yeah.
The other weird thing about people being upset about the comics versus this is that Natasha is supposed to be married to Red Guardian in the comics. So it's kind of weird that he's her dad.
Yeah.
And somebody on Twitter made a comment about she calls him daddy. And now I'm going to stop that.
Great.
Thanks,
that's Twitter.
Wrong. Thank you, Twitter.
Thank you so much. Anyway.
That kind of playing with, like, comic continuity doesn't really bother me if you want to, like, again, twist around characters to make it different. A lot of times it actually, in my opinion, has worked out for the better, especially in the MCU. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I feel like Taskmaster was completely underutilized. Fine, make her Dreykov's daughter. But you want to talk about something that was, you know, that should have been this, like, unstoppable, and she was on the screen for what, maybe 5 minutes, 6 minutes at that, because she's got the one fight with Natasha on the bridge, and then she appears a couple more times for, like, maybe a minute and a half because they keep getting away from her. But she just, I mean, it felt very underutilized, which made it feel even more forced and less shocking that it was Dreykov's daughter. And that it was, you know, this robot under mind control. To me, it would have been much more interesting if it was Dreykov's daughter and she was fully freaking aware of what she was doing and wanted revenge, and was completely devoted to her dad because Natasha blew her up when she was 7. Like, that to me would have been more interesting.
Yeah, it took away any of her agency that she had.
Yeah, quite literally.
She was literally just like a robot under his control. And I think you're absolutely right, Ashley. If that had been how they played her, that she was conscious and she was out for revenge. You know, obviously it would have been a lot harder to redeem her at the end, which they did. But I think it would have been a lot more dramatic. Right, exactly. Did she?
Well, does she need to?
Well, and if she was complicit with the whole thing, then no, maybe she didn't.
No, and then that's, you know,
if she's basically like a super soldier and she's redeemed at the end, then where was she in the big fight against Thanos?
Right.
Again,
I think
questions.
Instead of trying to go for like the shock factor of, oh my goodness, it's Dreykov's daughter, they should have just had that right up front. It's Dreykov's daughter. Natasha did this to her. She's out for revenge. Mm-hmm. That would have made for a better storyline than trying to go for shock value that nobody was shocked by.
Absolutely, it would have.
Right. And you would have had, if you had done it sooner, you would have had more shock.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And quite frankly, you could have still, I mean, I would make the argument that you could have still redeemed her at the very end in the same way. You know, Natasha, you know, they have that little moment or whatever where Natasha saves her life and is like, hey, I did what I had to do. I'm really sorry. May not have fully redeemed her, but at least redeemed her enough to like go with the widows and turn her life. Like that could have been her recruitment story. Like you didn't have to like just snap your fingers and be like, okay, she's good now. You know, they sprayed the magic red stuff in her face. It's all fine. She could have had her own character arc and gone on her own character thing in the MCU and become an anti-hero or a hero. And it felt like a waste to me because it's the same. It's almost the same problem. Yeah. Well, and it's almost the same problem that MCU has with a lot of their villains where they utilize them for one movie and then they're one and done and that's it.
Or Star Wars, for that matter, if we're talking about how they killed off Snoke way too early.
That's true.
Well,
I think
that
was a nobody was actually minding the store and the plan kind of problem, I think, personally.
But so speaking of Val, we only have about 10 minutes left in the show. Speaking of Val, and let's talk about that scene at the end of the credits. Like, how did you guys feel about what's going on there? I personally have like, I appreciate her character. I hate her character, but it's because they're setting her up to be a like manipulative, like you don't know what her motives are. You don't know whose side she's on. I don't know. I don't know how I feel about that, but I didn't like that she was basically like, hey, Elena, why don't you go kick Hawkeye's butt now because he killed your sister, which I feel like is, you know, and how does she know that that's what happened? I don't.
Right. There's a lot of questions there that I have. And what I don't get is, you know, I feel like Yelena redeemed herself. Like that, the fact that she tried to do right and take down the Red Room and then to like just go the opposite again with her character. I'm like, I don't know. Like, I just have lots of questions as far as like, and again, a lot of time happened technically between when this movie ended and where that end credit scene picked up, because that is supposedly
a lot of time.
And a lot of time. So again, there's just so many gaps and questions that I have about that, about her story. And so, you know, it's interesting because now I'm blanking on the character, who was the power broker in Falcon and the Winter Soldier.
Sharon Carter.
Yeah, Sharon Carter.
Sharon Carter.
Yeah, because I think Sharon Carter is also in cahoots with Val, I think, if I'm remembering correctly, or possibly. So
possibly. I don't know that we know for sure, but possibly.
No,
that's what everybody's assumption is.
Yeah. So again, there's like this whole I'm sure all will be revealed, obviously, you know, that's what teasers are for. But like it just seems kind of random that again we jumped from where we finished in the movie to that end credits scene. That's just me. But I'm excited, kind of, nonetheless.
It is, but in a way, I find it makes me almost more interested in a way. And again, it would have to be done correctly. But it would be interesting to me if they took the take on it. Okay, Yelena, you know, she saved the widows or whatever. We can allude to that at some point down the road. And, you know, she tried to live a good life, but that was too hard or something. Or maybe Val has recruited her and she thinks she's on the right side. She thinks that she's in S.H.I.E.L.D. or something and doesn't realize what she's doing is the bad side. Or for all we know, because in some iterations of the comics, Val is on S.H.I.E.L.D.'s side. For all we know, it is S.H.I.E.L.D. that they're recruiting for. And it's a big double fake that you're not supposed to like Val and assume that she's a bad guy. So I'm kind of open-minded about it. I'm reserving judgment to see what they actually do. I do find it interesting with the whole Hawkeye thing. Obviously, this is just a setup for the Hawkeye series that my guess is they might have been a little concerned that people weren't necessarily going to watch as fervently as WandaVision or Falcon and the Winter Soldier or Loki. You know, to try to stave off some of that Marvel burnout maybe and get people to still watch this, because clearly there's going to be plot points that they need to establish, probably for Yelena to continue on and do whatever she's going to do. I know some people have thrown out Thunderbolts, some people have thrown out Young Avengers or what have you. Clearly it's a vehicle for something that they need people to watch. So I'm kind of the mind I'm reserving judgment to see what happens.
And I had assumed that they were going to be setting up the Hawkeye TV show, but I thought that's because he himself was going to make an appearance in this movie,
Right.
and not because we're just going to pigeonhole a photo of him.
Even if it had been flashbacks when they were supposedly, because that's another thing. Like, I still have a few questions. Like, how did Budapest and the battle for New York feel at all the same? Like, I understand more of his comment, because if you were hiding out and everything, I don't understand how that felt anything like an alien invasion and people just everywhere. Like, I was expecting, not just one bomb, but several bombs, like a whole crazy thing in and I don't even think like Budapest lived up, like what she alludes to what happened in this movie versus what she kind of alludes to happened in the original Avengers movie. Like, that to me was still kind of weird. But if we'd have had flashbacks, maybe it would have made more sense. Just saying.
Yep.
But oh well.
I do want to bring up one point that Brandy had in the chat about when did her universe start coming out and being successful and selling a lot of merchandise versus when they decided to start pushing more women because money.
Right. Yep. Well, and again, circling back to Wonder Woman, I think that was part of it, because again, I don't remember a whole lot. I mean, even though it wasn't Marvel, it was still like the first female superhero movie that I can ever remember, and let alone that did decent, like not only decently well, but supposedly set records that year. So yeah, so I mean, if we went back and Googled, I would imagine it's probably somewhere around that time.
I know for sure that
we took a look at. Go ahead, sorry, Desi.
No, I was just gonna say, speaking of merchandise and female heroes, I know for sure that Jill and I both bought matching backpacks of Star Wars. So.
I have Ray on a backpack, but I don't have a lot of Marvel stuff. But I mean, to that end, we went to the Marvel store, we showed you guys that clip that we filmed at the Marvel store, and there's a decent amount of female merchandise, but it's interesting because I feel like for as much as her universe is out there now and kind of doing all of this, I think the stuff they're putting out is still, like, I would say the majority of it is still more focused on and themed after male characters in the Marvel or Star Wars universes than it is after females.
These ears and the Loki ears that came out, like, those are, well, I mean, again, not spoiling the series, but Loki is obviously we know him first as a male character, and same thing with Cap, obviously. But like, I actually, and I will say, because I did say that I got merch to show on the show today, but there's more stuff, more interesting stuff at Box Lunch and like other stores like that. Like, for instance, I didn't see a single Falcon and the Winter Soldier pin when I was at Disney, but there we go. They have one at Box Lunch. They also had this Loki pin from the series. Aww. They also had, and I mean, I think they were like, they quickly sold out of Black Widow stuff because I tried to look for some, and this was like the only shirt that they had left, and it was in the clearance section. But they had, they at least had some pins for her, and again, that's one of her older looks from one of the other movies. But you know what I'm saying? It's like, you can't, it was really surprising to see how little they had on Disney property. And even with the pins, like, we didn't film it because I wasn't at Fantasia Gifts at the time and didn't think about it. But when I was at Fantasia Gifts or at the Contemporary, that was like the first section of Marvel pins, like, that of a significant amount that I had ever seen. So, like, in general, I feel like Marvel, but especially females in Marvel, are underrepresented in the merch side of things.
Yeah. But I think that's, that's pretty true across the board for any female character in Disney, Marvel, Star Wars, what have you.
And if you want to hear about that, watch the Pink Tax episode from 2 weeks ago.
Yeah, right. Yep. All right, so we are coming up on time. The last thing I want to do before we go is talk about our next episode, which is coming up in 2 weeks on July 28th, Wednesday, July 28th at 8 p.m. And we're going to be talking about raising your kids Disney. So I'm kind of feeling like this might not be the show for me to be on. But we're going to talk about, like, if you have kids, like, do you bring them to Disney all the time? Do you not? Are you trying to kind of like balance that with other things in their life? Do you want them to be just as big a Disney fans as you? We're going to talk to Ashley because she's going to be a Disney mom soon. And what does she think about it? Yeah. Hopefully not July 28th soon.
No, God, no, please no. Not ready just yet.
But by all means, let me throw this back up. By all means, if you have stories, if you have thoughts about this, we definitely want to hear your input. So please email us at inkandpaint@wdwnt.com with your stories, your opinions, your thoughts. We will share them on the air on our next show. So with that, I want to wrap up, say good night, thank everybody on the panel. Thank you to my co-host, Ashley. Thank you, Emma and Desi, for being here. This has been a great conversation. And I think, at the end of it, if you haven't seen Black Widow, I think you should. If you've seen it, go watch it again. It was a pretty good movie. Maybe after another watch, we'll have more things to say. Or at least more opinions and more kind of thoughts about how this fits into the bigger picture. I kind of want to go back and watch Civil War and Infinity War again, and
Me too.
Kind of think about it more in context.
Yeah, watch Civil War, then that movie, then watch Infinity War.
Yeah, exactly. All right, so with that, we're going to wrap up, and thank you, everyone. Have a great night, and we'll see you next time in 2 weeks for Ink and Paint.
Good night, everyone.
Bye.
Uh-oh. Or we won't play closing credits. All right, well, I'm really sorry, but I think we're just going to not play closing credits and sign off. Thank you, everybody.
Anyway.
Video issues tonight, but thanks, everybody. Have a great night, and we'll see you next time.